And thank you for coming along. I don't quite know why the audio is not working, but I'm going to share my screen in a moment when I can remember. Share desktop, screen one, do this. So, excuse me, just to make life more difficult, I have a sore throat as well. Over the last few months, I've been watching on the Tech Up Women course and hearing lots about it, lots of good things. And we had, I'm part of the Drupal Association, and we had Dr. Sue Black come along to one of our conferences, DrupalCon in Amsterdam a few weeks ago, and talking about her life. And one of the things is something called Tech Up Women, which was great. And I kind of got thinking as to how much of the course involves this thing called open source. So I thought it would be useful to bring some women I know that are busy using open source and producing open source projects that basically change the world, that are changing the world that we live in day to day. So I've got a few people here. One person's unfortunately not well. We'll come on to that in a moment. And help them to tell you what they do and why this is maybe an area you need to look at too. First of all, I thought I'd better mention what open source is. I don't know how much on your course that you work with open source, but it literally is software that you can pick up, change, reuse, modify, use as you want. It's a real enabler for anyone to go out there and make changes, positive changes to the world. Okay, and it's all around us. It's totally changed tech. Some of the things that just literally just pulling some logos offline are things that are open source based, where you can download the code, use it yourself, and not have to pay. Not only use it, but change it, make it better, make it work for you, properly own it. I know on your course you've been using Python to do some coding. Python itself, the code that makes Python work is available. You can go change it. You can go say, here, I'd really like it to work in this other way, and propose changes. And people actually take you seriously and may well take them on board. So all of these projects, WordPress, I'm sure you've heard of. Android, I'm sure many of you have got Android phones. That's open source. You can download that. You can make your own version if you really want. People do that all the time. Git, a tool that many of us use, probably all developers use at some stage in their lives, to look after their source code while they're working. That itself is open source. Lots of them. So yeah, it's code. It's code that you can change. In fact, this is actually a little bit of Drupal that I changed last year, I think it was. That's buried deep inside Drupal, I think, for a demonstration that we make around a recipe book. So yeah, it's code, but more importantly, it's people. Open source is nothing without people. It is, sorry, excuse me. It's a whole collection of people. Yes, it's the developers who write the code, but it's also the project managers. It's the people who design what it's going to look like, the designers. And in fact, we have one of the designers in our list of people. It's the people who raise the funds to help things happen. It's the people who test it, who do quality analysis on it and make sure it's high quality, so that when people use it, it actually does what we say it does. It's all of these people. And organize teaching, and so on, so that people can learn. And these people aren't all in San Francisco, although some are, many are. They're all around the world. So I made a special effort to get some people from different parts of the world. I'm based in the UK, just down in Norfolk, not that far away from many of you. And we've got people, I've got a video from Subi, who's in India. There's Ada in Africa. There's a couple of people on the call from the US. There's lots of people in Europe, and so on. Okay. So I'm going to go through some people, and I just want to check that you can actually hear me before I carry on. So I'm going to stop this. Hang on a minute. Can I just check? How do I do this? I just wanted to check. Can you hear me? Because I cannot. It's all good so far. Yeah, I can still. Yeah, all right. I wanted to check because I can't see. So I'm Rachel. I'm Rachel Lawson. I'm the community liaison for one of the open source projects called Drupal. Drupal is a piece of software that people use all around the world for making websites. There's lots of different ones. There's Drupal, there's WordPress, there's Joomla. They're all free. You can just go get them off the internet and start using them tomorrow. Drupal itself is used in quite a lot of kind of bigger websites, major, very ambitious websites. Most major universities use Drupal. Their websites are Drupal. Oxford University is, Cambridge University is. I happen to know that Durham University signed a contract with an agency that does Drupal last week. So maybe your website will be soon. I only learnt of that last week. So there's that. I work with tens of thousands of people all around the world, helping them get involved in contributing their time to making the product better. And they're making it better so that they can then use it. So it's kind of that return back all the time. So I try to help them get together, work together in lots of different ways. So that's kind of what I do as a job. I'm also one of the mentoring coordinators. So we have a program by which when people come, help them get involved in learning how to actually get involved and make people better. So add the code, add to our marketing tools, and so on, lots of different things. So there's a whole developer relations role in lots of open source projects. It's a whole industry of people that are out there doing this for Android, Drupal, WordPress. I know lots of people in WordPress do it. I know people in Joomla that do the same job. I know all these people, yeah? And it's a big different thing across the world. This next bit's going to be interesting when I start to talk about other people because I can't hear you. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my. Let me go back to here. So that's about me, what I do, and what I do day to day. Justine, I'm afraid, literally just before this call, does regularly suffer from migraines, and she's had to call off today. So I'm afraid that we can't hear from Justine, but I was going to ask her how she got into being involved as a head of design at Code Enigma, and it literally was because she spoke at an event. She had a great interest in design, and she organized an event called Front End United, which is in Brussels. And she spoke. What she did is she spoke about how to improve the look of websites. And whilst there was an owner of an agency in the UK who was there. See, went, actually, do you know what? We want Justine to come and work for us. So speaking at events is absolutely something to do. So I hope I'm filling in for Justine a little bit there. But getting involved and actually contributing that way is really useful. So I'm going to move on. Sorry about Justine, but there you go. So Sally, can you tell us a little bit about you? I'm going to stop my share of the screen. And if you can tell us a bit about you, I'll try to get my audio working.
Great. I don't know how to tell you when I'm finished, so maybe I'll turn my camera on and wave. So I'm Sally Young. I'm a senior technical architect for Lullabot, and my role there is a technical lead on large projects in publishing and marketing, and typically with the content management system Drupal is involved somewhere in the pipeline. I am speaking.
Yeah.
I also volunteer as an initiative lead and core subsystem maintainer for the open source Drupal project, and I also give a lot of talks during the year about Drupal mainly, and sometimes JavaScript, and sometimes competitive Tetris. I discovered Drupal whilst I was working on my master's degree in computer science when I was interning at magazine publishers. And I then went on to work at a local agency where I got to work on lots of interesting projects in publishing, government, music and film. I then joined Lullabot about 8 years ago now, having followed the company's podcasts and other learning materials that they produce for free. And they were a very prominent agency in the Drupal community. And one of the things that actually really drew me to them was the whole company was distributed. And I've been a very happy remote worker ever since. So very grateful that being part of open source has been able to give me this amazing lifestyle. And so I started out contributing to open source projects with bug fixes that I needed for my client projects, which actually is still a big part of my job to this day. And then from there, I contributed and maintained a couple of libraries, and then eventually got asked to co-coordinate Drupal's JavaScript modernization initiative and help to maintain Drupal's current JavaScript. And that's me. Can someone wave at Rachel for me, please? Okay, thanks.
I can actually hear you now. Thank goodness I've restarted and I can hear. Oh, wow, this is a way to run a session. Okay, thanks, Sally. I just heard the end of that. So what I'd like to do, thank you for what you said. I'm going to pass on to Heather. So Heather can tell us all about Heather. I'll let Heather introduce herself, but Heather can tell us a little bit about how you actually help run one of these projects, how you help run a large open source project like Drupal, how you make it sustainable.
So I'm Heather Rocker. I'm Executive Director for the Drupal Association. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the southeastern US. And like Sally mentioned, one of the great things about working in technology is there's a lot of flexibility. So I run a global organization from my home office, which is fantastic. And I get to do some fun travel, but I don't have to be in a traditional office every day, which is actually one of the perks of technology. So with the Drupal Association, we're here to really support the project and the people. So you've gotten to hear from Rachel about the people aspect, and Sally gave you a taste of how people contribute to the project itself. But the association was formed so that we could have a thriving open source community, and in our cases around the Drupal project itself. We do exciting things like events. So we host DrupalCon both in North America and in Europe each year to get people together so they can collaborate, they can talk about business, they can learn new skills, and also have an opportunity to be mentored through contribution and learn how they can contribute back to the project. And part of the association is events, but we also have engineering that's here in-house. So we're working on things like Drupal security. We have part of our engineering team works on as initiative leads, so they make sure that the project's moving forward. And then we're also responsible for the maintenance of Drupal.org, so that everybody that relies on Drupal can make sure that the technology is working the way that they want. The fun piece to me, too, because I have a background in both engineering and in organizations supporting women and girls. So the great thing about open source communities is there's a huge focus not only on the community and volunteer aspect, but with Drupal and a lot of other open source communities, there's an increasing focus on diversity and inclusion. So part of our charge is also to make sure that we have a robust community, that community reflects the world that we live in, that the people involved feel safe and included, and that we continue to diversify so that the project actually becomes stronger. So that's a piece that's really important to me, that we spend a lot of time looking at how we can do that even better. And what's great about this program that you're involved in is that we're really looking at the talent pipeline for open source. So who else should be involved? How do we get the next generation of open source developers, designers, UX, everybody that's involved, marketing, and all those roles that play into open source. And we need more people coming in, because eventually a lot of the people involved today will be retiring and rolling out. Another piece that we're responsible for is you've got this community that's contributing to the project, but you have to have a way to recognize and reward them. So a large part of why the association exists is to make sure that we're accurately looking at those contributions, that we're rewarding them in ways that are meaningful both to individuals and to organizations, and that we are looking at not only code contribution, but non-code contribution. So people putting on local events, which is really important to projects like Drupal, to people that may lend to marketing, to outreach, and everything you can think of that helps run an organization. We really look at not only recruiting people into being contributors, but mentoring them up, looking at succession planning for leadership, and making sure that they feel rewarded and recognized, which is a huge part of any volunteer organization. All of that happens. But as Rachel mentioned briefly, we have to make sure that there's funding and operational support. So a huge part of my job in particular is to make sure that we're working with the community, in particular with service providers, end users, along with donations from individual contributors and community organizers, so that we can run the association, so that when projects come up that are important to our open source community, that we can fund those and make them happen. And also our team, which is a mighty team of 17 people at the Drupal Association, we look at making sure that we're operating efficiently, that we've got best D&I practices and best operational practices internally. And so it's really looking at how do you serve a global community with a small team from a nonprofit perspective. So it's a really neat mix for me of both nonprofit and technology, and I love it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Heather. You gave me the opportunity to look properly and make sure my laptop is finally working properly.
Okay, good.
So thank you for that. Next, I'd like to introduce Megan. Megan Taneke is manager of the Open Source Program Office at Google. And I'd love to hear from Megan about what the role of a tech giant like Google is in open source. Megan.
Just had to unmute. Thanks for that introduction. It's great to see everybody. And I have a long history in Drupal, helped build and run the association, and I just love seeing the legacy live on. Heather's doing a great job. And in those 8 years that I worked in Drupal, I got to understand what the ingredients are that you need to run a project in a very, deep, meaningful way. And I left Drupal to go work at Google, which has, well, I would say Google is an expression of open source. It's obviously a massively large company, and it is using open source projects that other people have created. It has created its own projects, and just like the mass of it really comes down to some numbers. We have 2,500 open source projects that we've created. And then in terms of contributing, well, we've released millions of lines of code, 72,000 repos were contributed to by Googlers, and 120,000 pull requests were created as of 2018. So it's just there's been a very large bet for Google to build with open source. And we started with Linux, and we've just expanded beyond them. So any technology that you are studying or working with, we are probably also working with and have contributed back to. And, so what we like to say is that Google is an expression of open source. And when Google uses open source, it's good for Google. It's good for Google products, and it's also good for the industry. And I work in a department called the Open Source Programs Office. Google created the concept of this kind of department. And really our job, as we say in our mission, is to bring all the value of open source to Google and all the resources of Google to open source. And what that means is that we make sure that anyone that comes into Google knows what open source is. We train them on how to use it well, stay in compliance, because there's lots of licenses out there, but they need to use the license that works for Google. They need to understand how to be compliant while working with GitHub and with other projects. And so we provide training to everyone that's coming in. We teach them how to use third-party projects or projects we don't create. We teach them how to create the software and release it in compliance. And then we also help steward some of these 2,500 projects so that a community forms around the project if that's needed for the open source strategy. And we provide different kinds of outreach programs to grow the community in the way we need to grow it with the right mix of talent. So it can't just be code contributors, as Heather pointed out. You need doc writers and mentors and designers and all kinds of talent. And we need to make sure there's good engagement and good channels for this engagement to happen in, and that it's done following a code of conduct, and that there's clear governance for each of these projects. So we provide that kind of stewardship. And then the other part that we provide is sustainability. So it's one thing to bring people together to work on projects, but really it's open source is all about human resources and people coming together to create something. And they can't just do the work. They have to thrive while they do it. And they need the right environment to do it and the right resources. So Google is very keen on investing those resources back into projects that we care about and the industry as a whole, because everything's so interconnected that we can't just think about the projects we care about. We have to look more broadly. And so the role that I have is on the leadership team, making sure that we have a clear strategy for achieving all of that, the right resources in place to achieve our mission, and that we are really making sure that when we use open source, we do well by doing good. And so by doing well, that means we want to make sure Google is using open source well and is benefiting from it, that our products are built well with open source, and that the industry that we're relying on is sustainable. And the doing good part is really making sure that we are giving back, not just because it's the right thing to do, but again, we want to make sure that the projects in the industry is going to be healthy and viable for a long time, because we've made a big bet on open source. And it's really important that we are good citizens and making sure that this whole supply chain of open source software is future-proofed for us and for others. We also want to make sure that we are doing well by investing in ways that make all of these projects in the industry have the positive change that we want to see in the world, that we all want to see in the world. And so a lot of that has to do with our diversity and inclusion programs. If we're going to invest in an event or we're going to invest in a foundation, we make sure that it has clear diversity and inclusion goals. And if they aren't there, we help them, provide them with those kinds of knowledge, support. And lastly, the other thing we do as an open source programs office is work with others on the sustainability front and contributing to projects, because there are many of us that care very deeply about giving back to the industry and the projects we care about. But we can't do it alone. We still need many corporations to be contributing to open source. And so We work with other open source program offices at other organizations. You might see them at Comcast and American Express, at Capital One, just a few companies in my backyard that have an open source programs office, and really working with them to understand how we can all be contributing more and start a contribution culture within our organizations. So these are the kinds of things that keep me up at night, allow me to contribute back to open source and do it at scale, because Google truly is an expression of open source.
Thank you, Megan. Cool. Okay. Oops. Yeah, thank you. So, thank you, Megan. Moving on. Next, I'd like to introduce Ada. Ada is the co-founder of Open Source Community Africa. Ada is based in Nigeria, I believe. Is that correct, Ada?
Yes, it is.
What can you tell us about setting up in industry in Africa around open source?
Okay. First off, hi everyone. Good evening from Nigeria, because Nigeria to be precise. I hope everyone can hear me. Okay, so just like I was introduced, my name is Ada, actually, and I am the co-founder of Open Source Community Africa. So creating a community / organization, so Open Source Community for short, OSCA. We're a community on one part, and then we're also an open source organization on one part. So I'll talk more about the community because that's what we're more focused on. Creating a community here in Africa that's fully focused on open source. First, I think it's OSC is the first largest community focused on open source here in Africa. Before we got started, there hasn't really been any community like this down here in Africa. The reason why we started this was to bring together developers, designers, content writers, basically anyone interested in open source across several African countries. Because I've been a developer advocate for a very long time now. I've been developer advocate for several tech companies and currently at Google now. And it's down here in Africa, it's a different thing. One, because the communities are still coming up. Though we have developers, we have very seasoned, very experienced developers, but we don't have the platform where people can always reach out and find other projects to work on, and where they can also network with, connect with other interested minds, other experienced individuals who are also into open source as well. So we decided to start that community to bring together everyone and also try to make it as diverse as possible. So while we're promoting open source, we're also bringing in more ladies, making sure that the different ways you can contribute to open source is emphasized on. And then we're also taking it to locations where people wouldn't naturally hear of tech activities or developers coming from those locations across Africa. It's been exciting, it's growing, and we're still looking forward to expanding.
Fantastic, thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Ada. I'm going to move on to Mugda. Mugda is a software engineer at Google, and you work with something that is mostly open source or has open source parts to it. And I think it's probably something that we've all heard of and probably many of us use every day, and that's Google Chrome.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. So Google Chrome is indeed, it's fairly easy to talk to everyone about, doesn't need a lot of introduction. It does have a big layer, which is open source, which forms the Chromium browser. And some of the UI, which is Google branding, etc., is not open source. However, it's open for everyone the code is open for everyone to read. So I'm perhaps the person with the shortest tenure in the open source community here, but I can speak to it from a developer perspective. So I grew up in India, and my first experience with open source was in college when I realized Windows was really expensive, and I was famous in college for never having a fully functional laptop because I was always installing different distros of Linux on it. And back in the day, things used to not work out of the box. So I was always having to find device drivers and install them. But the whole idea of people spending all this time and energy towards something they were passionate about and collaborating on an open platform like that really stuck with me. So a lot of the projects throughout college and then masters were inspired by this idea. And then when I came to Google, I realized Google will pay me to work on open source. So why not? Chrome has a huge user base, right? And so I've been working on the part of Chrome which is called the web platform. So I've been adding APIs to Chrome which web developers use to build websites. Now we've been focusing in London on APIs that will help them build offline capable websites. So websites that should continue working normally, even if you don't have internet connectivity. So as you can see, we're always kind of at the bleeding edge of Chrome and trying to push the boundaries and adding new capabilities so that websites can be more and more functional so that we can bridge the gap between native apps and web apps. There are a few things I'd like to share from my experience over the past 2 years, and that is that I've noticed that open source code really endures. Android and Chrome both are 10 years old now. Linux, I think 28 or 29. And when you kind of make you build something nice and you make it available to everyone to own and improve upon, even if your goals and agenda change, that product will live. It'll probably outlive you. In fact, I met someone the other day who had written Tor onion routing, and he was telling me how it was almost completely different to what he had written initially, because people then took it on and improved it, and it looks completely different to where it had started with. And that's a really nice thing, actually, to see your product outlive your career is amazing. The other thing is that open source community is very, very distributed. So over the past 2 years, I've actually traveled a lot. I was in Sydney for a month through a program called Chrome Envoy, where you go and help out any team throughout the world who are working on Chrome. And I have liaised with some people who also work remotely from home and are very respected in the open source community, but you will never have met them in person. But also, you get to go to these conferences and meet people from all over the world, that it forms a very special community around working in open source. And BlinkOn is one such conference that I would recommend if you're into browser development, that you go to at least once or listen to some of the recordings from. And then the third thing I wanted to point out is the open source community are very, very passionate and by definition, very, very opinionated. So it's almost like you have to build a thick skin to be able to engage with everyone and still be respectful towards everyone's opinions, because it's not when you work for a certain company, and I've worked for companies for 5 years before I started on Chrome. When you do that, there tends to be a culture filter when people hire for a company. So you'll more or less find people of your personality type or of a culture fit to yours. In open source, I post out an intent to ship something, and anyone can come and respond to that. In fact, this whole week, I have shipped an API, and I've been kind of firefighting a lot of strongly opinionated posts and responses and opinions on the spec that I've written, which is the web standard describing this API, or the open groups where I've posted about this API. And so it really takes passion to survive. It takes belief in what you're doing, but also it encourages a really strong product at the end of the day, and a very secure product, because people will poke holes in your design. And so you would have had to think about all aspects of your design beforehand, or be willing to say, okay, you got me, I was wrong here, here's an improvement. That brings me back to the first point. This is why open source products endure. And yeah, that's in a nutshell my experience of working in open source.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's a really good description of working in open source. Yeah, the friends that you make is a really important part of that. Friends that you make all around the world, which strangely brings me on to my next speaker, because my next speaker, Suba Gupta, CB isn't actually on the call, and the reason she's not on the call is because she's in India, which is where she lives and works, and it's after 1 o'clock in the morning, and 2 weeks ago CB got married, so it seemed a little unfair to say no, you need to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning for me. So we agreed to record a video about it. Joanna's going to play that in a moment. And just because she got married a couple of weeks ago, and I went out to the wedding because we're friends, and I've stuck a couple of photos of the wedding on the end of her video just for you. Okay, so if you want to play that, Joanna, then that would be great.
Yep, 2 seconds. I'm sharing my screen now. Right. Can you see a black screen?
Hello, everyone.
Yep.
My name is Suba Gupta. First of all, I would like to apologize that I could not attend this webinar in person because of the time zone difference, and therefore I have recorded this video clip. I hope you guys don't mind that. So let me start by introducing myself. I work as a quality analyst in Srijan Technologies, which is a Drupal company based in New Delhi in India. And other than that, I also work as a volunteer in the Drupal community, wherein I help organizing events for Drupal, creating a platform, and I also do that internationally for events like DrupalCon. Recently, I have been a part of DrupalCon Amsterdam, which was in October, and I worked as a volunteer coordinator there. So today I'm not here as a woman employee of some company, but I'm here as a passionate volunteer who loves to work for the community and has chosen her own path in that direction. So I would like to talk about choosing the path and starting somewhere. So it might seem easy to choose some path for your career and then move in the direction of your goal, which you have decided what you want to do or what you would like to do. But gradually, when you start working on it, you realize that this is not something which you were actually liking. in the first place. There's something totally different, and that's what kind of happened with me as well. So if I tell you my journey, back in 2016, I started my career as an intern in the Drupal development field, but gradually I understood that instead I love testing more, and so I switched to the role of quality analyst and started building my career towards that. And alongside, I was also working as a volunteer, which again started in 2016 when I attended my first Drupal camp in Delhi with the intention that I will be getting more knowledge, very hardcore depth of Drupal technicalities and meeting people and talking about technical stuff. But what actually happened was totally different. What I learned there, that instead of doing Drupal development, I can contribute in another way, that is helping organizing the events, creating a platform for other Drupal people to come and talk, meet, greet, etc. So that was the point of realization for me. And that was the starting point for me where I started building myself towards the path that helps me to lead in a direction where I can do what I love, which is organizing such events. So that's how I moved ahead, and I also started participating in international events. I was also a part of Drupal Europe in 2018, and again, I was working as a volunteer coordinator there. In fact, that was my first international event where I was the part of the organizing team. So I had never thought in 2016 that I'm working as a Drupal developer right now, and I will be a part of an organizing team later in 2019. So I'm just trying to prove a point that when you start somewhere, it is not necessary that that is the correct starting point for you. No, it might not be. And it is also important to be positive at that time, because there's no correct thing as such for you. You have to understand yourself first and then choose the correct thing for you. So I would like to conclude by saying that you should never stop believing in yourself and keep moving. I would not like to take much time right now, since I know there is a panel of more wonderful people out there and would like to hear all of them, and there's time restriction. So I would end my video right there, but I hope to actually talk to all of you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
And Subi's wedding was in Kota in Rajasthan. And in fact, both her and her now husband, my goodness, were involved in the Drupal community. But it was an amazing wedding. Okay, so oh, VLC, eh? That's another open source piece of software you're using there. The video player VLC, yeah. Okay, so I hope being able to hear from a few people who are out there changing the world using open source is helpful to help you think of that as maybe an option for something to get involved in and to learn about. Everyone's still around, so if you have any questions, if you post them into the meeting chat or raise a hand if that's possible on this system, then I'll see whether we can, between us, answer any questions. If there's anything, there might not be. I know time's knocking on now. I hope you've all voted. If you've not voted, I hope you're going to go vote straight after this if you're in the UK. Don't leave it.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe we've got no questions.
Oh,
Oh, there we go.
Oh, do have one.
Oh, can you hear me? Hello, everyone.
Oh, who's that?
Hello. This is Remy Ogunbi.
Hi, Remy.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to ask some of the questions regarding open source in Africa has been answered by Ada. However, I still want to know, how can we expand open source further in Africa? Because there seems to be a big problem regarding platform and infrastructure that people can connect to when it comes to open source. Are there any plans in the future for providing open source also platform for people to be able to use and develop software on in Africa, especially I'm also from Nigeria, and it's really unbelievable that technology wise we are still so backward because there are no such platform to connect to. I used to support IT service management in the past, and I noticed that the only platform for people in most areas of Africa will be to connect to one infrastructure in South Africa, or the next one will be in Kenya. So there is no such thing to connect regarding open source. Are there any plans in the open source community to facilitate this so we don't remain, left behind regarding technology and so?
Okay, thank you, Remy. So as regards your question, yes, there are plans to expand and improve on those things that you have mentioned. But the first thing that we are trying to gain traction on is the community part, in the sense that we have realized, and from my own experience in the several roles that I have handled, Africa runs generally on community. When people see their fellow other person thriving in something, they want to get interested in that thing. So we want to start first with building very strong communities and making people aware of these things first of all. And then yes, we are partnering with some top companies that we're hoping from 2020, to which in a few weeks time, from 2020 we could solidify this partnership to improve on what you just talked about. The first thing that we're planning to do from next year is we're having the Open Source Festival. The Open Source Festival is a 2-day event that we're planning to have. And we're going to bring people from across Africa, and we already have sponsors from Microsoft, Facebook, Google, AWS. They're going to be sponsoring this, and the aim of this festival is to introduce these tools, these platforms, these technologies to the African developers for them to start utilizing it. Now, I wouldn't say there aren't any developers here in Africa that are not aware of some of these platforms. They are aware, just that they're in a smaller number. But what we're planning to do is improve on it, grow the number, and then have it spread across Africa, where these developers, basically anyone who wants to commit open source across Africa, can connect on that platform. So there's definitely plans for that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I add one of the things that we've been looking into? Some people in the Drupal community have been looking into how we can help with training in places like Africa as a training tool. And someone has come up with the idea of a tool that we have called Drupal Ladder, making that so it can be used entirely offline. You can go somewhere where you can get internet, download the tools, and then take them away So then you could be using it for several hours or days of learning and trying things out and following step-by-step guides to then go back and download more as we see something that could be quite useful, especially because it's not that the internet is not available, it's more of it's not available all the time.
So what did you say this tool is called again?
It doesn't exist yet. There's an old tool called Drupal Ladder, and they're looking at the concept of a new tool called Drupal Ladder 2, for want of a better description at the moment. And it's purely a concept at the moment.
Okay. I also wanted to know, how can one join Drupal community, you know, as an individual, or do you have to be part of an organization or a company in order to be able to join?
Wow. Anybody at any
Rachel,
time.
there were a couple questions too about how to get involved in the UK, and then how to start contributing. So that can all kind of go together.
I was just thinking that, actually. So anybody can, and this goes for any open source project, okay, pretty much the same. Anybody can download the tools and start using them today after this meeting. And in fact, I will put some links in the thing shortly. You benefit most by joining the community, by taking part in a community and talking with people. Always, that always makes a difference. So, for example, and each project does that in a different way. The Drupal project has a website, drupal.org, and if you go to drupal.org/community, there's a place where you can say, I want to do X, Y, or Z, and then you can go in there and it will tell you where to find things to make that connection. One of the important things to remember is people are always better than reading things. Chatting with people is always better. So making connections through local meetups. So, for example, if you are in an area where open source is popular, like the UK, then going on tools like meetup.com, typing in things like Drupal there and finding meetings. So in Manchester, there's the Northwest Drupal User Group run by some good friends of mine who meet up on a regular basis and talk through ideas, things that are going on, work together on making changes. These meetups are all over the world. Meetup.com is usually a good place to find them. There are conferences, so I can post some links to find conferences like groups.drupal.org/events. We'll give you a list of those for Drupal. They're also on, again, things like meetup.com and searching in there. Meeting people is always the best way. Always works. But yeah, I'll post some links. Different open source projects introduce new people in different ways. There is one particular almost famous website in open source circles called github.com, which is usually used for storing code, but is used for gathering people together. And you can find projects that do just about everything on there for different reasons. Some open source projects are on there, some are elsewhere. Okay. But mainly, yeah, spend time with people rather than reading books. Have you anything to add to that, Heather?
I think that's it. I think, the emphasis is you can definitely get started as an individual. You don't have to be part of an organization. And what's really been great about open source communities is they want new people involved, and especially in communities like Drupal where there's mentored contribution and established organizations at the local level. I think it's pretty simple to get started and get integrated. But if you have Any other questions or issues? The nice thing about having Rachel, and now you've got her contact information, or if you don't, we'll get it to you, is she can point you in the right direction if you have any other questions.
I mean, as an example, I mean, in Drupal, I know that we're going to be having what's called a global contribution weekend at the end of January, where people will get together in various places around the world to make changes to Drupal. Now, there's nothing wrong, and people would be very welcome to say, I know nothing. Can I just lean over your shoulder and watch? People are completely happy with that. People are intensely happy to show what they're doing. Open source people tend to be friendly people in general. So they're very sharing by their very nature. So make the use of it. Feel free to just say hello. I will put some detail about that later. As I say, lots of different open source projects. I know Drupal more than most other things because that's what I use day to day. So what else have we got in here? I think it's newbie, contributing, getting involved. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Any more questions from anyone? In that case, thank you very much. And we shall, I think we'll call it a halt there. Thank you for, we have got one. Yes, very good point. Open source careers are also lucrative. Yes, we need to talk about that, Heather. Heather's my boss. Yeah, it's true. It is true. I'd like to thank all of the speakers who volunteered, because they are sharing people, their time to come along to this and shed some light on a subject that can seem somewhat opaque to start with. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure other Tech Up Women will appreciate it too. So thank you for giving your time, and thank you for Joanna for letting us do this.
You're welcome.
That's okay. And I just can't believe that my audio wasn't working at the start. I apologize for that. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.